Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Jennifer, where are you? How are you doing? What's been happening?
I'm in my bedroom in southeast London, where I've been since March. Could be anywhere. I'm all right though.
Is the correct answer.
Yeah, I think that's all you can say.
I think today's been quite bad, what with one thing and another. That's getting the energy level up.
Yeah, good. Everybody's feeling good now.
Well done, Andy. Stu, where are you?
Well, I'm in the office bit of my house in Stoke Newington, and today my wife was running around the park, and she saw Johnny Trunk of Trunk Records, who put out lots of radiophonic stuff, and he asked her how I was. He said he hadn't seen me around. He was worried that I'd spent the whole of lockdown just sitting in a dark room full of Fall CDs going out, and that is exactly what I've done. But this week, I've been sitting in a dark room reading Rosemary, Tonks, an equally objectionable character. So, yeah,
definitely. There's definitely a Marquis Smith, Rosemary Tonks. I'm loving it. That's great.
Yeah, definitely got that in early. Good. Yeah. All right.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast that gives new life to old books. Today, you find us in late 60s London. We're on a lunch break from the Electronic Sound Workshop, sitting in a seedy pub, drinking Stingos and eating cheese sandwiches that make our gums smart, and trading cryptic stories about our love lives, or the lack of them. I'm John Mitchinson, publisher of Unbound, the platform where readers crowdfund the books they really want to read.
And I'm Andy Miller, author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And today, as you've heard, we have joined virtually by a new guest, Stuart Lee, and an old guest, Jennifer Hodgson, who was last on Backlisted for the Anne Quinn episode, which was number 67 in 2018. Hello, both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming on this dark, dark day. Stuart started performing Ye Olde alternative comedy in 1988. He has been called the world's greatest living stand-up comedian by The Times and Britain's worst stand-up comedian by The Sun. He is currently #1 in the pop charts, quoting the Anglo-Saxon poem The Wanderer as a guest of Asian Dub Foundation on their Coming Over Here single. King Rocker, the documentary he co-authored with Toast of London director Michael Cumming about Birmingham punk survivor Robert Lloyd of the band The Nightingales, is on Sky Arts on January the 30th. How long have you spent making that?
Actually, it's been moved to the 6th of February now. Well, it took about 2 years to make, but obviously it was finished in March last year, and now and then we were supposed to take it around cinemas, and so it's sort of been in limbo for a year.
Stu's tour Snowflake Tornado is currently on hold, with 50 final dates to be rescheduled for later in 2021. He is 52 years old, and most people have never heard of him. Stuart Lee, the last time I saw you was actually on the I can't remember if you played the gig or not, but you were down here in Canterbury.
What happened was it was the Monday night. I was in Canterbury on the tour. Boris Johnson told people that they shouldn't go to the theatre, but didn't tell theatres that they had to close. That was at 5:00, which caused a massive confusion, and all the people on the committee of the theatre had to turn up in Canterbury and decide what to do, and then the public had to decide whether to go. There was a mad atmosphere on the night, which was nothing to do with me. And because I think people knew it was the last time they were out. And when I saw you, I was hanging around in Canterbury waiting for confirmation as to whether we would go ahead or pull it. And it was pulled that night, and we went in the theatre and packed up, and everyone was sort of saying, oh, I wonder how long this will last. And lots of my set was actually put in the tour drive a merch guy's sister's garage because we thought we'd be back on the road pretty soon. And, that's coming up to a year ago. Mad.
When you get back out on tour, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna stick to that material from however long ago it was?
Well, if you remember, the second half of the show was a story about Dave Chappelle's backstage rider, right? And that, as far as I know, hasn't changed. It may have got, but then the first half was sort of about the culture war, I suppose, as I saw it in 2019 when I wrote the show, which is going to be 3 years ago by the time this gets finished. So, yeah, it will need it. And so many things have changed. Loads of things have changed in the last 24 hours.
I was
in
going
terms
to
of
say, even the last few days.
in the last few days. So, really, I've got to wait till I know it's happening and then kind of take a reading and try and rewrite the first half so it's not like the description of the news of 2019, but in a way that doesn't mess up the second half. So it's going to be a real little puzzle. Then I think I've got a recording of the old first half that I think I'll put out there somehow. But yeah, it's weird, difficult thing. It makes you realise how much has happened. I mean, I was talking about issues about perception of race and whatever, and Black Lives Matter has happened since this went down, so many things. So yeah.
Well, keep working on it in isolation. That's totally healthy. We're also so pleased to have you back, Jennifer Hodgson. Hooray!
Hooray! Hello. Keeping it light.
Keeping it light. Always light. Jennifer Hodgson is a writer and critic. In 2018, she edited a collection of Anne Quinn's short stories, The Unmapped Country. She's currently working on a book that started out being about Anne Quinn's life, but has ended up being about a load of other stuff besides. She's calling it a heist road movie psychodrama about ontological wonder sickness.
Yeah, that's how I'm pitching it. Are you impressed?
I'm very, very impressed.
Thanks, babe.
Rosemary Tonks would approve of that. She cried big prodigal daughter tears when they asked her to be reader in residence and programmer at Humbermouth, the book festival in her hometown of Hull last year. And during lockdown, she has been working on reinventing herself as an amateur contemporary dancer. Is that true?
Yeah. I was trying to be funny, but it is also true.
It's based in truth. That's the main
It's
thing.
very impressive. In your bedroom?
Well, no. There's a spare room. I live in a shared house. There's a spare room in the attic, free. And, everyone has these kind of like flights of fancy escapism, right? And mine just happened to take place doing some serious Merce Cunningham stuff, like sort of maybe early 80s New York, living in a flat with a fire escape, jazz shoes, those weird plastic trousers. Other than sit at my desk and think about a dead 60s writer for all year, the other thing I've done is be in the attic and
it's brilliant.
Do that.
John, why are we here though?
Well, the book that you've chosen to discuss is The Bloater, the second novel by the English poet Rosemary Tonks, a writer Andy first brought to our attention on Backlisted in episode 45, the one on Anita Luce, where he discussed her collected poems published by Blood X Books in 2012 as Bedouin of the London Evening. The Bloater, however, was a 60s novel published by the Bodley Head in 1968. And for reasons we will explore, it's now unavailable.
Now, we don't normally say this at the start of the Backlisted, but we're going to today because this is the rarest book that we've ever featured on the podcast in 120-something episodes. So the only way you're going to be able to probably get hold of a copy is it either by paying a lot of money for one or for finding one in a library, which is quite hard because, first of all, it's a 50-year-old novel, over 50 years old, and it was never reprinted. And second of all, Rosemary Tonks herself, in her later life, made a point of going into lending libraries, borrowing copies of her novels, and then burning them.
Is that right?
Yes, that is.
God.
She was relentless.
True.
Was she trying to increase their second-hand value by?
She was trying to protect people from Satan.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Wow.
So we decided that it's okay for us to talk about novels that aren't easily available because we're not totally controlled by the market. And we decided to talk about The Bloater because in different ways, everyone gathered here today, first of all, we all fascinated by Rosemary Tonks and her work. And the second thing is we've all got a specific connection with this novel, The Bloater. Jennifer, as you will know, specialises in female experimental novelists of the 1960s, of whom Rosemary Tonks is one. Stu has a long-standing interest in the concept of the outsider artist, and the Rosemary Tonks fits that bill. She's very active and very successful from the mid-60s to mid-70s, and then she disappears completely. She died in 2014, and that those last 40 years of her life, as we'll discuss, she's doing some quite eccentric things. I'm wanted to talk about The Bloater because, as John says, I've talked about Rosemary Tonks' poetry and this novel before on Backlisted back in 2017. Nikki was keen to discuss this novel because, as our producer, it features characters based on Delia Derbyshire and the pioneering work of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop in the 1960s. And John's connection to the book is because the lead character is suffering from gout throughout.
Correct.
Which is no laughing matter, is it, Johnny?
Sorry, I apologise for laughing.
And he saw this as a chance to raise gout awareness by...
Gout Awareness Week starts here.
That's a long-winded way of saying we hope you can get hold of the copy. We're going to try and talk around the book and give you as much of a flavour of the book and of Rosemary Tonks as we can as we go along. But before we enter the realm of the essence of Tonks...
What have I been reading?
John, what have you been reading this week?
Sorry, very pleasing joke.
Well
I have been reading. Now, I'm sorry, this is shameless self-promotion. I don't often do this, but I want to talk about an unbound book which is published in 10 days' time called Crow Court by Andy Sharman. It's the first novel. It's a historical novel. And I obviously think it's brilliant. I wouldn't be bothering you with it if I didn't. It's kind of spookily one of the best debuts I think I've read. It was actually discovered by Rachel, my wife. We had almost no work to do on it. It's set in Wimborne in Dorset in 1840, and it covers 20 years. It is structured around 14 episodes, 14 characters. It has almost a musical structure. There is an overarching mystery to be solved. A child is found floating dead in the river. And a choir master who's suspected of having either killed him or forced him to commit suicide is found dead shortly afterwards. So you need to get that out of the way, that bit of plot out of the way. But really what makes it, I think, brilliant is just the way Andy Sharman's written it. Each of the episodes, 14 episodes, kind of connect, although not obviously it's not chronologically told in that way. It's episodic. Yeah, I suppose each one's written in something you'd call it almost like a different tonal key. Really, really brilliant writing.
It sounds, from what your description of it, it reminds me of Ulverton by Adam Thorpe. Does it have something?
Yeah,
like
it
that?
does. It's got that kind of historical ventriloquism. There are a couple of the characters speak in very broad Dorset dialect, which I'm not going to bother you with today.
Shame.
But, there is a short glossary in the back, so it's got a bit of Ulverton. It's got the sort of layering of. Do you remember Graham McRae Burnett's His Bloody Project?
Oh yeah,
that kind of feeling of a historical mystery. It's got the sort of what we might call the powerful vernacular energy of Ben Myers, and indeed Ben gave us a brilliant quote for the book, saying it's a book that, or the kind of long shadows cast by ancient folklore of Essex Serpent. It's obviously also set in the mid-19th century, so it's about the ebbing away of people's faith and the growth of Darwinism. I just think it's a really, really beautiful bit of work, and he is going to be a writer, I think, who will write more, perhaps even better novels. But it's an amazing first novel. I'm very, very, very proud to be publishing it. And being a debut, it's been very difficult to get anybody to take even the faintest bit of notice. So it is available on all the usual places people do buy it. Shall I read just a tiny little bit?
You had this same issue, didn't you, with the brilliant Mary Ann Sate?
Yeah, Alice Jolly's Mary Ann Sate Imbecile.
Yeah.
This shouldn't be as difficult. Mary Ann Sate Imbecile was written in a kind of a verse, and it was 600 pages long, but brilliant, and was runner-up for the Rathbones Folio and shortlisted for several other prizes. We had a similar problem getting people originally interested in Paul Kingsnorth's The Wake, which was written in a sort of hybrid Anglo-Saxon modern tongue. But this is not. This is I think this is not as forbidding. It's just very, very clever and intricate, like I say, like a piece of a sort of chamber music, 14 movement, whatever. Anyway, do you want to? Shall I read a little bit? Or
Yeah, let's hear a bit.
just a very, very quick paragraph. This gives you the feel. When John sees the fabric floating among the reeds, he merely thinks it strange that someone well-to-do should misplace their linen in the river. Even a recognition of the chorister's gown leads him to wonder why a choir boy would not remove his clothes before going for a swim. Then he stops wading, stands still, and takes it all in. The one hand floating, the knuckles breaking the surface, the other arm obscured from view, the sheen on the fabric from the soaked-in water, and the dreaminess of the boy's gown where it wafts around in an underwater billow. He takes a slow step forwards, frowning, causing breaks in the stream as he does so. The weeds, the gown, and the body move with gentle waves back and forth to acknowledge his approach. He watches the body's open mouth as water drifts in and out, like ocean waves among the ribs of a shipwrecked hulk. He knows the boy. He recognizes the head of curly blonde hair, even though it's spread out, sullied with weed and specks of grain from the mill. John, standing midstream, water pushing against his legs, turns without moving his feet. He is looking back over the fields for someone to bring help, someone to absolve him from the scene, to witness his innocence, someone to make it right. But there is no one. He thinks that maybe Bill Brown would be by the bridge and even shouts for him. Bill! While Bill calls back asking what the matter is, John has not the words with which to answer. He looks again at the body, and his eye catches the crow that has been watching him. Black-feathered and cold-eyed, the crow seems to sense a threat, lifts its wings, and pulls itself into the air. It arcs up and across the field in a great long curl, allowing the wind to take it. John mutters to himself, "Oh, Lord." That'll do. Sets up a bit of it.
It's great. It's great. Is that out now, or is that out?
It's published on the, let me tell you, the 21st of January. So effectively, when people are listening to this, it will be out sort of in 2 or 3 days' time. Historical fiction, I think, when it's this good, is not really historical fiction at all. It's something else. It's a kind of novel of ideas. Brilliantly done. Andy, what have you been reading?
So I thought twice about choosing another novel by Elizabeth Taylor. But I've chosen another novel by Elizabeth Taylor called The Wedding Group. And there are several reasons why. I thought fundamentally I chose it because although I've read other books, and although although Elizabeth Taylor's had her own episode of Backlisted, just because Elizabeth Taylor's had an episode of Backlisted, that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to read any more Elizabeth Taylor's or talk about Elizabeth Taylor when she's one of my favourite writers. So humour me, listeners. You know how much I like
You're giving
Elizabeth
people
Taylor.
permission to do the same, Andy. It's good. It's kind.
That's part of the reading experience. Certainly at the moment. Life is quite hard at the moment. And if I want to read and talk to you about something I've read before and insist on talking to you about it, I'm just going to jolly well do it. This novel, The Wedding Group, is one of the later Elizabeth Taylor novels, one of the ones she wrote in the 1960s. And these don't have a great reputation. In fact, she's sort of at her least fashionable in the 1960s. And like the novel we covered on Backlisted, in a summer season, and the novel she wrote at the end of the 60s but didn't publish until the early 70s, Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont. They're quite liked at the time, but they become much loved later on. The Wedding Group is published by Chatto and Windus in 1968. I think I'm right in saying in the same month that The Bloater by Rosemary Tonks is published. And I went and looked up reviews of both books in the various internet sites and microfiches to compare the reviews. And I can tell you that The Bloater by Rosemary Tonks was reviewed far more warmly and widely than The Wedding Group by Elizabeth Taylor. So Elizabeth Taylor is at her least fashionable in 1968. It's her 10th novel. But all the things that I love about Elizabeth Taylor are here in the book. The elegant sentences, the apprehension of character, and that sense that there's real venom in it. You're reading it, and then you look down at your stomach and you're bleeding because she's knifed you on the way past, though you haven't noticed it because she's done it so elegantly and smoothly. And the wedding group is based on her life in the 1940s. She was a neighbour of Eric Gill and his commune. And it has a character and a setting based on Eric Gill. Now, when she wrote this, she probably didn't know about Eric Gill what we have since come to know about Eric Gill. She describes a painter called Harry Breton, who lives in a commune called Quain. And I'm just going to read you a bit about him, which contains all the elements of the things I love about Elizabeth Taylor. And the fact that it's about such a sinister subject makes quite clear what's going on, really. When you hear the name Cressy, that's Harry Breton's granddaughter. At Quain, the commune, everything was all of a piece. Everyone, everything fitted in to the master's scheme. For Harry Breton had views on every aspect of life and had, with what seemed to be the greatest luck, found that all formed part of his whole vision. Here, there was nothing he thought of as spurious, nothing meretricious, nothing counterfeit. All was wholesome, necessary, simple, therefore good and beautiful too. The outside world had jerry-built houses, plastic flowers, chemical fertilizers, materialism, and devitalized food. Beechwoods on 4 sides protected Quain. It was to that world beyond the beechwoods that his granddaughter Cressy was looking. She dreamt of wimpy bars and a young man with a sports car, of cheap and fashionable clothes that would fall apart before she tired of them. In that world, she might find a place for herself. It was worth trying, for there was none here. She knew that she was about to become, if it had not happened already, the one flaw in Harry Breton's way of life, the first blemish upon Quain, something which did not hold good, which ruined the argument. Harry Quain was a short man with a grey beard, rather long hair, thin on the crown and protruding eyes. Always he wore a blue painting smock and sandals. He had hired a suit when he went to get his CBE, and he and Rachel, in clothes borrowed from her sister, a worldly woman, had looked very odd as they set out. He came now slowly across the courtyard on his way to the workshop. Cressy made herself stay there by the wall, although she longed to dart away and knew that she should be in the kitchen with her cousins. She had always feared and disliked her grandfather. When he came close to her, she stared into his brilliant blue eyes without blinking, waiting for the storm to break. He rested his hand on her head for a moment, as if she were ill, and then went on towards the barn.
Where does she imagine that that commune is? Is that in Wales or in London? Is it the
No,
waterfront?
it's near High Wycombe.
Right.
Which is where Gill's commune was.
Yeah.
Because he moved one. He went out to Wales in the end, isn't he?
With David Jones and people like that. Yeah,
I just thought it was amongst the obvious things about that. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in relation to the Bloater is Cressy wants to live the kind of life that Min in the Bloater is either living or wants to live.
Yeah.
And Jen, the bit I know you're going to read from the Bloater is kind of a piece with that yearning for plastic materialism. But anyway, so that's The Wedding Group by Elizabeth Taylor.
Plastic material.
Tell Me What Happened is a podcast that asks, what would you do if you saw someone needing help?
This tree comes crashing through the roof of my vehicle, and I said, I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Listen to the true stories of people who choose to save a stranger on Tell Me What Happened.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like... All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender-Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Realism, love it.
One of the things about the Bloater is it's got invaluable for a first-hand setting of the radiophonic workshop. But before we get on to that, Jennifer, where were you? When did you first discover Rosemary Tonks?
Well, I came across our Tonks, as I'm insisting upon calling her, even though I know that she'd completely hate it. And I'm slightly terrified of her. Well, not slightly. I have been preoccupied in a way that's puzzling even to me with this sort of moment in British culture in the 60s and with the writing of that period that was sort of full of possibility and at the time met with like great critical hostility. Like, what are you doing with our precious sacred novel form? So I came across her as part of that whole gang, although, you know, she hated when writers formed groups. Like many of them, they didn't really consider themselves a gang. But there's a sort of loose grouping of people from that period.
Such as?
Oh, yeah, name names. Sir Quinn, of course.
Yeah.
But people like B.S. Johnson and Christine Brooke-Rose and Bridget Murphy, and many of whom are sort of, you know, over the last 10 years or so have been kind of coming back to light and are being appreciated as being this awkward but really interesting period of cultural history in the UK, where there's this moment where, you know, in the shadow of modernism, after modernism, and against the sort of like social realism that's happening elsewhere, and the kind of like older generation of liberal intellectuals who are still wringing their hands about what culture can do in the face of all the, you know, the fall of civilization. You just get these people doing really weird stuff, these funny little novels that are often pretty self-consciously minor. They're sort of novels of ideas, they're sort of social satires, like many of them, but they're not. They're really vicious. The worlds and the characters that they create are really insubstantial and strange and like hardly rendered at all. And I just think it's this moment that's really weird and full of potential. I met Tonks as part of that whole group of weirdos.
And Stu, what was it about the poet and novelist Rosemary Tonks that first attracted your attention?
Well, I think I read the obituary when she died, and I was really surprised I'd never heard of her. And I read the poetry that was then newly available. And I really liked. I couldn't understand about half of it, to be honest. But
Yeah.
what I could understand, I really liked, and I even liked the stuff I didn't understand. I liked the jarring of words that ought not to go together, that she somehow compounds, and they create a real spark of excitement. And then I wanted to find out more about her, and I found out on the internet that she'd written a book about being involved with the radiophonic workshop. And I thought, well, I'm really interested in that. And I tried to Google it, and then bizarrely, the only person that appeared to have written about it at that stage was Andy Miller.
She'd be appalled. She'd be appalled.
Who I knew. I went, and have you got this? And he said he'd read it in a library. And I thought, well, I'd really like to get it. Then I saw it was for sale on the internet for like 250 quid, you know. And I ummed and ahed about it. I mean, I've never spent that. I've never even bought a car that cost that much. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm really tight. So I ummed and ahed about it for about 6 months, and it was still there. Right. And then I'd done a tour, and it had gone well. And my promoter, David Johnson, he said, you know, name what gift you would like. And I said, well, do you want to get us this book? Because I would never have bought it myself. Anyway, he got this, and it was an incredible experience I haven't really had since, which was that I would carry it around with me, reading it as you do on tubes and stuff, and I felt that it was so expensive and so rare, and no one had ever even seen that. The whole experience of walking around with it was terrifying for two reasons. One, because you felt like you've got this thing which you mustn't drop, and also because she's really frightening as well, isn't she, Jen? Yeah. Like you said, you kind of think, oh God, she'll be really cross if I leave this book tonight. You know? So, but I remember that the actual week or so of carrying it around with me. You can't escape from her. She smothers you. Worse in the earlier book that I read, to be honest. There's no even plot in it to give you a break. You just kind of
you're being stared at very hard, aren't you? Throughout that book. Yeah.
So I just remember that being so exciting to have this precious thing, and it is ridiculous because when I'm of a generation where things were rare. You might have a record that no one else had found, or they might lend you one that it was impossible to hear otherwise. And it was strange to encounter that feeling again.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I saw it somewhere for like £1 or something because and it was because I'd bought the only other copy of it that it had disappeared off all the algorithms.
I'm lucky enough to own a copy because you spent £1 on me, which is extremely kind of you.
Maybe we could all hold up pictures of the books because that would probably be the main copies that exist in the UK. You could all hold up your.
I haven't got one. I'll hold this up.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
I'm going to take a picture. Okay.
I've made this little CD as well. You see of the.
Oh wow!
Look
at that.
That's a bootleg.
Anyway.
Yeah.
We're like a weird club now, aren't we?
I'm afraid we are. Yeah.
Perverts and weirders.
Yes, it is.
That's what
this is exactly how cults start. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Here we are.
It's really great to talk to other people that have read it because or her at all, because it sort of burns a hole in you, and you start to think you've imagined her tone of voice because it seems so. The only thing I can think of like it is B.S. Johnson, like you said, and it's not really like that,
So let me read you we read the blurbs on Backlisted. This is the jacket copy from the original and indeed only publication of the Bloater by the Bodley Head in 1968. And who knows if the Bodley Head had a marketing department in 1968, but I reckon Rosemary Tonks herself probably wrote this. The Bloater by Rosemary Tonks. A woman's most delicious problem is surely to be exposed to the attractions of two utterly unlike men, to enjoy their rival magnetisms, to consult all her best friends, but remain incapable of knowing her own feelings until the last unexpected moment. This is the situation that Rosemary Tonks exploits with relish in her entertaining and outrageous novel. Min, married, but like a reckless little schoolgirl still unbroken, is being wooed by the Bloater, a huge, luxurious baritone who moves across Europe from one concert platform to another. He irritates her, but attracts her enough to worry her. Her friends are helpful or unhelpful in their characteristic ways. Claudie, you're keeping up with this, right? Claudie, dangerously gay at 60, appropriates the whole affair as a new entertainment. Raquel, a girlfriend, is in turn attracted by the Bloater. Jenny, de haut en bas, keeps her informed on current sex customs, but it is in confiding in Billy, an old crony and musicologist, that the danger lies. For here is the male equivalent of Min herself, clever, quick and gay, and therefore a man she cannot mock or defeat. This is the story of a witty, capricious, but vulnerable young woman of London, caught in the more than half-serious dilemma of whom to choose as a lover.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't read that, would you?
No.
WTAF, as the kids say, yeah.
In the words of Eric Morecambe, he won't sell many going at that speed. So Jennifer.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate depiction of the novel?
I mean, yeah, it's accurate in a sense, but like with most of the stuff I read by her, you come out of it at the end and you're just like, what the hell was that? Like, what just happened there?
Let's unpack that.
The level of contempt, like she makes me feel like the most sincere and earnest person in the world, and like awful for that. I mean, this isn't. I made a list of some of the images that she uses. She's got this really peculiar attunement to like the gross, mildewed corners of everyday life, right? When she like conjures an image, it's going to be of like bed sores or meatballs or spit, stewing innards, bleached nurses' hats, freshly washed toilets, the airing of back bedrooms, old mattresses. So the world that she's created is just this one where she has this like hyper-vigilant sensitivity to like all the grossest stuff that's there, you know?
It's funny you'd say that about the mildewed corners. The only other book I've read of hers is Emir from 1963, only other novel. And that actually begins with her finding a massive fungus in her bedroom growing behind the cupboard.
Well,
which she takes it to a restaurant to ask the cook if he knows what it is.
Yeah.
And it's a disgusting, weird start.
I mean, the other novel that I've read of hers is Opium Fogs, which opens with a scene where an old man who's eating outside starts coughing on a piece of mutton gristle.
That's how you hook them in. Where'd you go? Where'd you go next?
Yeah.
That's the thing. You've got them, but where?
This book starts with a polishing scene, a completely random polishing of a wooden stool.
In order to cover the sort of like gamey scent of a large man.
Yes.
You know?
That terrible line about if you're that big, it must be difficult to wash everywhere.
Yeah.
Bloaters famously smell, don't they? Because they're fermented herrings with the guts still inside, so they have a really gamey, tangy.
The thing is, this is coming from the same place as some of her poetry comes from. She has that kind of Baudelaire.
Yeah.
She loved Baudelaire. This is a kind of fleur du mal way of looking at the world, i.e. fruit when it's rotten and on the turn is at its most rich and most pungent. And there's a kind of, that's got that the reason why she's so appealing to me is that combination of that but she's like, it's Baudelaire in a 60s bedsit or a coffee bar or
bedsit Baudelaire. Exactly. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And like we said, Stu, this is got chapters set in the Radiophonic Workshop, which is probably the reason why both you and me, and Nikki for that matter, wanted to first kind of get our hands on it.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that led me to it, because it's largely irrelevant to that book, really. That whole plot line.
Everything is. Everything in the book is irrelevant to it, really.
But I'm just glad that it led me to read her. And one of the sad things about doing this is presumably people will listen to it, and some of the expensive books, and there's some knocking around for about 40 quid now. I need to get those before this goes out.
You got a week.
This will make them go up more expensive, won't it? So it's awful.
I will say this: she didn't manage to totally expunge the record. They are in libraries around the world. They are there. It's just that they're very rarely borrowed, because such was her success in diminishing her own reputation.
Do you want me to read the bit from the?
Yeah, please read a bit.
Yeah, this is from chapter 2 of the Bloater, and it's just a description of her workplace. She did work in real life briefly on a tone poem, with Delia Derbyshire in her capacity as a poet. But in the novel, she appears to be working as a sort of studio manager for them, although it's not really made clear what she's doing, to be honest. But anyway. Going along one of those dim brown corridors which led to the electronic sound workshop, I met a musician I know. We have in passing one of those exchanges which have taken the place of comments on the weather. Hello, Ron, how are you? Oh, sexually frustrated as usual. Inside the workshop, no one moves. The walls are blocked in solidly with machinery, and there are freestanding machines on wheels. The light is so bright you don't even look ugly. You simply look like yourself. Fred is brooding over a little piece of paper. Jenny is sitting in front of a dashboard of dials and switches. Today she's very got up. A tight, sexy green jersey, a leather skirt in a very elegant brown with scruffy patches to prove it's real, things on her wrists which she shakes about too quickly for me to focus, and black hair combed down on her shoulders and then fixed in position with sparkling glue sprayed on. Possibly this is why Fred is a bit glum. When Jenny is hunting, her tea break is a 30-minute phone call and her lunch hour is interminable. I'm very dashed by this long blue-black hair, and the corners of my mouth go down. I could just hear Claudie saying, "My God, I would die for that blue-black hair." Jenny looks up but doesn't smile too much, because she's only half made up and wants to hold her face more or less immobile until the evening, when she puts on the other half. Inside this armour, she's amusing, temperamental and clever. There's no air in the workshop. We're sealed in like tin shepherd's pie. The clock is silent, but the hands go round fast with that railway station stutter. I'm late, of course, and the little silver music stand has been put out for me already. I arrange my papers. I stop being human. There's no time to make mistakes in here. They're too expensive. We're setting a poem about Orestes to electronic sound. We're taking the sentiment straight, no wit, no discords. We know that however well we succeed, 50 experts, people who acquire theoretical knowledge without using it, will pour cold water on the result, and then 5 years later, grudgingly, and 10 years later, publicly stuff our work into the sound archives and refer to it incessantly to intimidate future electronic composers. Oh, that'll do, won't it? But you get
Oh,
the next
it's
page.
brilliant.
It's marvellous,
Yeah.
though, right? I mean, the thing is,
so great.
You know, what happened there was when I started listening to it, I was thinking, oh, is this going to play? I'm not sure if this is going to play. And as it went on, she's got such, the thing that Jen was talking about her range of imagery and how she uses disgust and energy. That's got real energy, that prose, you know, real focus too.
It's got disgust and energy. I worried that I don't like her. The voice that she writes in as a person. And when I was younger, this would have been a real problem for me. I remember seeing The Importance of Being Earnest when I was about 18 and hating all the people in it so much that I couldn't really like the thing. And then when I saw it again later, I realised that it wasn't necessarily endorsing them. I don't know enough about Rosemary Tonks to know whether the voice she chooses to write in was how she was, or whether she chose to exaggerate the worst parts of her, which I don't want to make it about me, but that's what a lot of us do as comedians, for example. Or whether she chose to exaggerate that part of the voice so that she had such a distinct voice and a comic effect. You know, she's interminable, the person in it. She's so bored of everyone and so dismissive of people, and she makes other people's lives such a misery by not all the characters in the poems and the character in both the novels, who are exactly the same character, both of them. You know,
I must make this point very quickly. So I read the reviews of the Bloater, right? They're all really positive. So she's widely reviewed and well reviewed. And the second thing is they talk about it as a sparkling comedy. But this is totally revelatory to me. It's pitched as a comic novel, as are the ones that follow it. They are. She thought she was writing this kind of Furbankian, Brophy-esque, sparkling dialogue.
As you say, she's by no means writing in a vacuum. I mean, there are kind of other people during the period with exactly the same kind of sort of like unremitting, sharp nastiness. I'm thinking of people like Muriel Spark or like Angus Wilson or someone like Penelope Gilliatt as well, who's sort of equally underdiscovered. Yeah, that's what passed as sort of like a comedy of manners. I think it's a kind of erotic charge, to be honest. And she does mention this in her poem. One of her poems, she talks about the half erotic convulsions of loathing. And it seems to me that's, one of the central things of the book, like this kind of, erotic charge of disgust and being like compelled by something, but completely repulsed by it at the same time and sort of shuttling around in that.
The great quote by John Horder, who says, listening to Tonks talk, her talk had an intensity bordering on active aggression. Which I think
I'd like to draw a distinction between the two novels that appear in the early 60s, which are Emir and Opium Fogs, which are reviewed together. They're published so close together, they appear together in a review in the TLS. So they appear. Nobody seems to actually know when Emir was published, 63 or 64. Opium Fogs, definitely 64. I'd like to draw a distinction between those two novels and then the four novels that appear in 68, 69, 70 and 72. The Bloater, Businessmen as Lovers, The Way Out of Berkeley Square and The Halt During the Chase. And those four novels are very of a piece. They're fundamentally the same novel each time. This kind of female protagonist, one of whom is even clearly based on Tonks. Her name is even Mimi. And I found an interview with Tonks where she was being interviewed about the poetry in late 67. And this is what she says. This is just before the publication of Iliad of Broken Sentences. Poetry is a luxury, insisted Rosemary Tonks, just before leaving for Ischia to write a novel designed, quote, to make a lot of red-hot money, unquote. The novel was to be written in 2 weeks flat. One suspected not only to make money, but as a necessary tranquilizer to pre-publication nerves. Now, I found another interview with Rosemary Tonks where she says that the Bloater actually took 4 weeks. But this is the key element that answered a question for me. I couldn't understand how these books fitted in relation to her poetry, which is so intense and laboured over in a good way.
Yeah.
And the answer is she wrote each one quickly
do
in
you
the
think
belief she was writing a sparkling
red
comedy
hot
of
sex
mad.
comedy kind of pot
Yeah.
boiler sort of? It's mad, isn't it?
for quote unquote, for the red hot money.
Yeah.
She called her novels porridge. I read another interview where, you know, she was like, again, fairly contemptuous about the reading public, and she was like, you know, the kind of like, these are entertainments that I'm making. It is interesting to think about the novels and the poems side by side, because it seems like they're working through the same material, and they are of a piece in a way, but there's the approach is different. Like, you know, there's the same disgust and there's the same contempt, but what she's trying to do in the novel with kind of comedy or satire or a certain kind of wryness, in the poems feels much more serious.
Yeah.
If she viewed the later 60s novels as you know, an attempt to do genre, then do you think that the first two novels from 63 were more serious for her, were closer to her heart? Yeah,
I do,
because
yeah.
I've got a letter from her, weirdly, from 63, where she's writing to Alvarez. You know,
where did you get that?
I just found it. I don't even know. I bought the book somewhere, and I wouldn't have spent a lot of money on it, and it came with it. I think I might have got it on Cecil Court somewhere, but I certainly wouldn't have spent Bloater money on it.
Maybe.
You know,
who's the letter? Who's the letter to?
To Alvarez, who was the literary editor of the Observer, was he at the time? And then she does see that she's asking him if the poem Orpheus in Soho is going to run soon, which he has accepted on behalf of the Observer, because she thinks that the novel is poetic. She says it has a good deal of poetry in it. This is the novel Emir, and that people will understand that the novel's supposed to be poetic if they see the poems run. She feels they're of a piece. And what you say about the idea that she wrote the Bloater for red hot money as a sort of pot boiler, it's interesting that you get this in a lot of Italian westerns that I love. They're genre, and they're commissioned as genre, and they're knocked out as genre. But because very often frustrated artists were making them, they couldn't help but make artistic films, even as they tried to make junk to fill up the cinemas of southern Italy. You know,
I should say, with my publisher's head on, I know that Neil Astley, who edited the Bloodaxe anthology of her poetry, that they've set up an archive at Newcastle University, a Tonks archive, and they're particularly keen to get letters, Stuart, because he's trying to pull as much material together. There's quite a lot of letters have come to light since 2014, and the book was the Bedouin of the London Evening was published. But I mean, I think he's trying to find somebody to write a biography.
I think that's an amazing thing. In, you know, amongst the five of us who are interested, love Rosemary Tonks, for better or worse, that you just turned up her letter to Alvarez saying, please review this, because
yeah, I know.
You know, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. It's a really sad letter, actually, because, you know, she's but you know, you can tell from the authorial voice that she's a proud person. I think it's difficult for her to ask for a review, you know.
Jennifer, her so that distinction between those first two novels, I think the first two novels are supposed to be a piece with the poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, they don't work for her as well as the poetry does. And so she just, when you read her interviews from the late 60s, she sees herself as a poet primarily, who is also turning out these novels one a year.
Yeah.
Right. So what do the novels have, do you think, that the poetry doesn't have?
It's weird. This thing about the distinction between the fiction and the poetry, like thinking about the letter that she sent to Alvarez. I know that Quinn, because I'm writing this book, I'm currently ensconced. Well, and my bedroom is the Quinn archive, because no one wants to make an Anne Quinn archive, so I'm sitting in it. So I'm in her letters at the moment, and she called herself a poet, but she wrote novels which were deeply poetic, and actually her Quinn's poems are far less successful. And I know from her letters that she experienced the same kind of like critical hostility, deeply, deeply sensitive to what critics were saying. And this idea that if a novel was too poetic, that was bad. Like this kind of like genre anxiety that critics had, where you'd get you'd get sort of dissed if your novel was too poetic. And it's interesting in the Bloater, you can feel the poetic bits sort of trying to creep in.
Yeah.
Tonally, there's this sort of unevenness. I'm thinking of the section where she's describing walking through the street in the light in Hampstead.
Yeah.
And you can tell that she is trying to write she wants to write a poem, but she's hanging back in this other voice.
That is my favourite section of the novel.
Yeah.
Because you're quite right, Jen. She allows herself the luxury of writing something she really cares about.
But the character, the lead character that is her, is in a form of denial as well. She tries to reduce her romantic encounters to the physical, and she's scared of them becoming emotional. In fact, there's a poem that's very explicitly about that, about trying to, I forget what it's called, but the character's trying to have an affair in a hotel room. And she's trying to go to a hotel room to have a sexual encounter, and she doesn't want any strings attached, and no one is looking. And can it just be a, clean moment? And then the last two lines suggest that you can never do that, and that you will be pulled into it emotionally. And so a relationship with poetry is not unlike a relationship with people here.
Jen, could you read us a bit from? I think this might actually be from that Hampstead chapter.
It's just after
Right.
this kind of moment of opening up into the kind of description of the light in Hampstead. She's been on a successful date with this guy Billy, who's a mate of hers, and she's kind of freaking out. Again, there's this human encounter and connection and love and affection comes. It's this really risky thing. So she's kind of freaking out, and she's becoming obnoxious. I need new clothes. Something in PVC with a visor. I want to change the shape of my face. It should be absolutely round. Yes, I need a circular chin and a rosebud mouth to cope with Billy. And 10 hours sleep every night, and a complete don't care kit of cigarettes, records, hairdressing appointments, films, and so on. Once I've decided on that, I realize it isn't enough. Even if I cram every hour of the day with ferny pleasures, I can't get rid of the smell of Billy's face, or of the authority and care of his arms when they grip me. 2,000 cucumber sandwiches, a Ferrari, a summer, raspberry jelly, ping pong, a naked picnic in long grass might possibly take my mind off him. One has to admit that he knows how to woo. Oh God, why doesn't he make a few mistakes? He's bound to sooner or later. You bet he's got some dancing routine hidden away, some David in front of the ark caper that will really let him down. And I shall pounce on it without mercy. At all costs, I must go on being spoiled and petted. I need presents. Well, there's the D'Annunzio first edition and the painting, two of the most unsatisfactory presents I've ever had. Intellectual hard cash, a compliment to my mind, simply asinine. D'Annunzio can't write and won't think for a start. Still, I like the green ribbons. No, I want something I can eat or wear or go to bed with. Billy. Yes, I'm ungrateful, impossible to please, inhuman, malicious, and demanding. Good. It's the only way to fight Billy. I've started gliding about in the house, practicing the way I'm going to look up at him next time we meet. In height, he's just about level with the curtains hanging up in the hall. I give them my sparkling practice glance. Not bad. And then a really wicked little squib of a smile, on and off in a flash. What a waste for a lot of overcoats. I might as well use it up on the bloater.
Oh, it's magic. Thank you. That was so great.
Yeah. None of us have mentioned, tellingly, that in the novel she is married.
Yes.
And the husband is just this thing. He's in it twice. Once he's eating his dinner and she forgets he's in the room and turns the light on. And then another time she says, oh, he must be lonely. I expect he's getting pornographic books out of a library.
Crucially, the husband, and he's kind of turning his back on her in bed, she blames for her condition, which is the condition of gout.
Well, now, as we know, this is really a novel about gout. And John, I know you've been waiting. You are a sufferer from gout, aren't you?
Let me tell you about gout. Gout is a very mysterious illness. And we know that it's caused, as I'll point out, we know what it technically causes it, but we don't know what causes the cause of it. It's hereditary, whatever. But it's most people who suffer from it, you know, and progressively it gets worse, and the pain is appalling. And it's just mysterious, because you think you've got it figured out, and then it comes back, finds another way to undermine you. But this is what she says about gout in the book. It's very, very Tonksian take on it. So really, it was the malevolent emanation from George is the husband, from George's back, lying there in its dark blue printed silk pajama top, that started off my gout. It says here, a disease of disordered metabolism, hereditary. That means it's been lying around waiting for me and only needed a few liquid lunches with Jenny and a sulky pajama back to assert itself. Oh, my toe. I've got it propped up at the end of the bed. It's as red as a red-hot poker and so sensitive that if Fritz opens the bedroom door to bring me a glass of milk, coffee is forbidden. I can feel the breeze and call out smartly, be careful. You're near the left side of my foot over there. Don't go near the foot of the bed because you could jolt it. Just hand me the glass and keep clear. Don't circle round it like that, please, Fritz. Every time you circle, my foot registers with a new wave of lava. Listen, can you make me up a bowl of hot water and bicarbonate of soda? It's time to bathe it again. You know what the doctor said? We have to control the level of your uric acid, my dear, like the level of the water in a swimming pool. I didn't even know I had uric acid. Now he calls it my uric acid. And I don't like that bit about the swimming pool either. Doctors are far too scientific these days. I don't want a scientist. I want someone to tell me I'm fabulous. No, not you, Fritz. Directly they do that, I jump up as fit as a fiddle. Oh, God, it's raging. But that is
that
remarkably,
John?
that is a remarkably accurate account.
I've got to say red hot money. If that's not red hot money, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's supposed to be obviously high, the disease of high living. There is a bit of that, but not that isn't. It's definitely, somebody said to me once, it's about repressed rage. And there's a hell of a lot of repressed rage in Rosemary Tonks.
Interesting. Same as depression. But she calls it the welfare state disease, doesn't she? Just to get a bit of a kick into the welfare state as well.
Yeah, don't like doctors being scientific. Just wants to be told she's fabulous.
I think we should hear from Rosemary herself. Would you like to hear her being interviewed about her literary inspiration, or would you like to hear her read a poem with the backing of Delia Derbyshire?
Well,
both.
I don't know if I want to hear either of
Jen, you choose.
Well, either way, she's going to have one of those like classic 60s RP voices, isn't she?
Oh, yeah.
That always really surprised me, but they all talk like that. I think we should go with the second. Let's hear her with Derbyshire.
So here we go. This is her poem, Badly Chosen Lover. And what I've done is I've got two different recordings of Badly Chosen Lover. You're going to hear the first stanza read by Rosemary Tonks on her own, and then you are going to hear the second stanza backed up by Delia Derbyshire and the BBC Radiophonic Workshop.
Badly chosen lover. Criminal, you took a great piece of my life, and you took it under false pretenses, that piece of time. In the clear muscles of my brain, I have the lens and jug of it. Books, thoughts, meals, days and houses, half Europe, spent like a coarse banknote, you took it, leaving mud and cabbage stumps. Criminal. Criminal. And criminal, I damn you for it, very softly, very softly, very softly. My spirit broke her fast on you, and Turk, you fed her with the breath of your neck, the breath of your neck, the breath of your neck. In my brain's clear retina, I have the stolen love behavior. Thoughts, meals, days, Your heart, greedy and tepid, brothel meat, gulped it like a flunky with erotica. And very softly, criminal, I damn you for it.
Do you know what? I spent the whole week not only reading Rosemary Tonks, but listening to her talk.
Yeah.
And actually, listening to her talk and combined with the details of her biography of her later life that we know, which is sketchy that we know, I ended up feeling really, not sorry for her. That's not what I mean, but really feeling, oh, you're really experiencing this. This isn't a thing you've put on. This isn't a pose.
No.
You're living this and expressing yourself as best you can.
She's living and experiencing this really intense register. You know, she's this highly sensitive person who has this sort of hypervigilance to the social world and its performances and its violences. And you see it in her books, you know, people just kicking chunks off one another. Like every conversation is this sort of like pre-planned kind of battle maneuvers, you know, in a war, which is something that, you know, she reminds me a bit of the French writer, which maybe some of you will know, Nathalie Sarraute, who was similarly sort of attuned to these subterranean, tiny little nuances in human behaviour.
Well, she writes 7 novels, in fact, but the last of them she burns in the 70s because of the changes in her life. And that the last novel is reputedly 100,000 words long. So all the late 60s and early 70s ones are short. And then she spends 6-7 years working on a longer novel that she then decides to burn.
The content of which was dictated by mediums, wasn't it, largely?
It's about her religious conversion experience, right?
Yeah. So let's hear from Rose. This is an interview that Rosemary Tonks gave in 19. And we should say the thing about Rosemary Tonks is Rosemary Tonks was successful in her own era up to a certain level. You know, she has a platform. She works for the BBC. She gets widely reviewed. Her novels are published. You know, but does she have an audience? That's a different thing. I'm not so sure she does.
Do you find inspiration from literature in any way? Not particularly literature, poetry, drama, but maybe historical works?
Oh, yes, historical stories, not historical works, which are usually so terribly badly written, because historians can't seem to learn how to write. I find French 19th century literature tremendously exciting and inspiring. Well, once you've learnt that you can advance human sensibility in a certain way, you look at life in a new way, then you look back to literature, then you look out at life again. That's how it works, isn't it?
Have there been any writers, though, that have been a notable influence on you?
All the great writers, from Shakespeare to Chekhov to practically all French literature.
You've never found yourself writing like them and having to stop yourself consciously?
Everybody does. The best thing about an influence is to realize it and to swallow it and never to throw it away. It's like throwing away all the advantages of meter or rhyme. Everything must be is grist to your mill. You want to be on guard, but not afraid. One always tends to find somebody who's closer to oneself than the others, or who one admires so desperately one wants to write like him. But this can be cured. You'll only find your own idiom if you are grown up. If you're a person, in addition to being a well-read person, then you can cure your reading with your life.
Yeah, right. Here's the thing with Rosemary Tonks. So that starts, and I applaud any writer who, when asked who influences them, says Shakespeare. Because that's setting the bar high, right? But then as she goes on, you listen to that and you think, wow, that's so insightful. That's incredibly true. You can cure your reading with your life. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's also interesting that the 63 novel that I read is really like Chekhov. The dialogues like Chekhov in the same way as Hal Hartley, actually, the American indie film writer, is really like Chekhov, where people have these huge speeches to each other and then say these incredibly pithy things. And he was actually very influenced by Chekhov. And she's clearly fought off the Chekhovian influence by the time
By the
of the
bloater.
bloater. Yeah, and so she's obviously aware and is doing what she's making a process of trying to find a voice that is uniquely hers, and she has obviously done that by the time you get to the time of the bloater.
Does anyone want to say what happened to her? John, do you want to say what became of Rosemary Tonks?
Her mother died at the end of the 60s, which and then she had a lot of problems with her health, her eyesight in particular. And I mean, as far as we can tell, she had some kind of cumulative. I mean, you'd call it a breakdown now, wouldn't you? I mean, that she became more and more dependent on seeking sort of wisdom from the East, from Sufism, from mystics, and from mediums. And gradually that, over a period of time, kind of focused in on finally a sort of Christian fundamentalism, where she came to see that only God could save her and only the New Testament could save her. Although being Tonks, of course, it was the William Tyndale translation of the New Testament that she liked.
But she ends up living in Bournemouth. She shuns all contact with the world, apart from she travels up to Speaker's Corner.
Yeah. To hand out Bible, and totally buries Rosemary Tonks, the writer.
Yeah,
she totally literally renames. She renames herself, and as you said, I mean, Burns becomes to believe that her work, her written work, was in fact evil, sort of satanic, and that if people read it, it would do them harm.
There was a very sad obituary for the poet Val Warner knocking around in the autumn this year, where they couldn't even. She died alone in a house she inherited in Hackney with no. She lived without any electrical power or lighting, and the obituary rather sinisterly was unable to say how long the body had been there. And she hadn't written anything for decades, and the last stuff she was known for was when she helped sort of repopularize Charlotte Mew. And there just seemed to be a sort of thing of just being too much for them. But then we're romantically in love with the idea of a doomed poet, aren't we?
Yeah.
But she doesn't take her life like some of them did. Like some of them kind of that she kind of rejects her life. And I mean, although I also was really moved by that Anton Warner obituary. Tonks seems to have ended her life reasonably cheerful. She had friends who said she was cheerful and chatty and friendly, and it's almost she'd found some sort of strange post-intellectual equilibrium through just basically deciding that she was going to dedicate her life to God, and that God would look out for her. And then there's a whole other stuff about her father dying when she was very young, and kind of slightly shonky childhood being moved around. So it's really interesting story.
Neil Astley records this thing in the introduction to the poems, which are available, Bedouin of the London Evening. He says she died in 2014. He says in November 2012, she wrote to a cousin she had cut off for 30 years. And she said, "I was boxed up under the most frightful mental pressure," all underlined. "I was not myself," underlined. "All my decisions were wrong, inhuman, appalling. Give me time, please. I long to explain it to you."
Slightly haunted by the line she writes in her introduction to her notes on cafes, that she says, "Telling the truth about feeling requires prodigious integrity." And you feel that prodigious integrity, that sort of wanting to get to the truth of things, it's almost like it burns her brain out. You sort of feel that she's somebody who feels so sensitively, like several skin layers fewer than most people, that she can't kind of continue living at that level of intensity, and settles for the old-fashioned consolation of a book that's got all the answers.
There's a good bit in the Bloater that is probably relevant to this, but I can't quite think how. But where she talks about she brings in a tape recording of her own heart, or that she's the radiophonic musician Fred insists that he can fabricate a better one from, and then she dismisses him as a left-wing idiot or something on the next page. But she does seem to be talking about a primacy of authenticity of expression over fabrication, and yet a lot of the novels seem to be concerned with witty surfaces, and yet in that moment, the character, she wants to make a case for the authenticity of the human heart, literally, against this fabricated version of it. And she gets very frustrated that she knows that her idea will get sidelined. And you feel like she has burned herself out, like a hummingbird whose heart has to beat 10 times faster than any other mammal in order to achieve the liftoff.
If you go back and listen to that clip that we heard from the radiophonic workshop of her reading her poetry, you'll hear that heartbeat in there. And if what is in the novel is true, that's her heartbeat. You'll hear her heartbeat there back in that clip.
Right, I didn't realise that. Yeah.
Again, this is what I mean about spending time with her. You don't have to like her. It's what Stu was saying earlier about he didn't like her, but that doesn't matter, does it?
I'm terrified of her, but I get her. But I'm talking as a person who's spent a decade sitting with Anne Quinn. You know, I've sat for a decade with a dead stranger, and so maybe I'm just more prepared to do that. I don't know.
I think she's really funny and talented and witty, but she's the sort of person that if she was my friend, there would come a point where I would cause some offence to her, and I would have to warn the teachers at my children's school about what she looked like. That's kind of what she's like.
That's so great. Do you both think that the Bloater or her other fiction? Do you think it would be interesting to? Should she be in print? Should people be able to be reading?
God, absolutely, it's fantastic, and that's why as soon as this is over, I've got to get on eBay and get some of the books because everyone's going to hear this, and it's But then it's like so many things. Sometimes you stumble across something that isn't known, and my wife and I talk about this all the time, and then your whole idea of the canon just falls apart. You think, what else have they missed? Yeah. What else have they missed, idiots? It's great that there's people like you, Jen, and this program doing this important, archaeological excavation work to get this stuff out there.
Yeah, and there we must leave it. Huge thanks to Stuart and Jen joining us on this journey into the modern private life of a singular and important, if not altogether likable writer. To Nikki for running our very own radiophonic workshop, and to Unbound for leaving the pate in the glove compartment.
You can download all 127 previous episodes, plus follow links, clips, and suggestions for further reading by visiting our website at battlisted.fm. We're always pleased if you contact us on Twitter and Facebook, and now in sound and pictures on Instagram too.
You can show your love directly by supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/backlisted. We aim to survive without paid-for advertising, and your generosity helps us to do that. All patrons get to hear Backlisted episodes early, and for the 20th of a first edition of a Tonks novel, they get 2 extra lot listeds a month. Our very own Boho Cafe, where we 3 talk, listen, read, and watch the things that take our fancy.
So we'd like to thank Stuart and Jennifer for joining us today to talk about Rosemary Tonks. I'd also like to say specific thanks to 3 people for their help with this episode. The first is to Neil Astley. A lot of what we know about Rosemary Tonks is because Neil Astley spent years researching this stuff, and he's the publisher at Blood Axe, and it's thanks to him that you can read her poetry in Bedouin of the London Evening. So thank you, Neil Astley. I'd also like to thank Giles Booth, backlisted listener for Giles Booth, who helped me out with something for this specific episode. And also there are some really brilliant Rosemary Tonks pages written by Brad Bigelow at the website neglectedbooks.com. And Brad helped me out with a couple of things that I was hoping to read for this episode. So if you enjoy Backlisted, there's no way you're not going to enjoy what Brad's doing at neglectedbooks.com. And certainly his Tonks pages are the next best thing to actually reading the novels. So please go and check him out. And also, we need to say thanks to lot listeners who get their names read out on the show as a mark of our thanks and appreciation. And John, why don't you do the opening batch?
Tony Dempsey, thank you. Anne Ristick, Stephen Booth, Richard Sully, Gail J, Clark Everetts, Sarah Guy, Michaela Johnston, Anwen Crawford, Hayley Whitehouse-Jones, Carolyn Drake, Victoria Francis, Gail Johnson, James Wright, Susan Baker.
We'd also like to thank Peter Arvidsson, Laura Trott, I hope it's the same one. Michael Cordenbrock, Chantal Walker, Ty Eggenberger, John O'Leary, Sarah Blenkinsop, Amelia Campbell, Jenny Stewart, Molly Peacock, Chris Senior, Laura Ann Evans, Donna McIlvaine, and Lloyd Callaghan.
And we also want to thank the British Embassy Moscow Book Club, set up by Adam Greaves as a way of introducing Russians to English language authors they may not have come across before, and a means for the British staff to discover Russian literature beyond the usual classics. They are all apparently keen fans of the podcast, so thank you.
And we'd like to say a second and special thank you and apologies to Relly Annette Baker for supporting us and for getting your name wrong last time. We're really sorry, but we've done it this time. Thank you very much. So thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you.
Oh, it's really nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
You can choose to listen to Backlisted with or without adverts. If you prefer to listen to it without adverts, you can join us on our Patreon, patreon.com/backlisted, where you also get bonus content of 2 episodes of Locklisted, the podcast where we talk about the books and films and music that we've been listening to over the last couple of weeks.